We're in the TechCrunch studio today with Varun Singh, who's founder and CEO of ScaleArc. Varun, welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
So thanks for coming up from Santa Clara, Southern California, as we say, up to San Francisco.
Really? Southern California?
Now you guys, ScaleArc, are in the database infrastructure space.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit just on the technical end of what you guys do.
Sure. So we're a layer 7 engine that sits between application servers and database servers. What we essentially do is we handle all of the traffic that's flowing from the application to the database servers. We give you deep analytics on that. We let you accelerate that traffic by either load balancing it or sort of distributing it between multiple servers and even caching it in NoSQL store. So we're a SQL, NoSQL hybrid in that sense.
Understand. But now companies who are using your technology, couldn't they just use something off the shelf from AWS to handle this?
Sure. So there's a lot of stuff that AWS provides, but there's a lot of integration involved in using all of it.
Okay.
So to give you an example, AWS can give you a master and a slave in MySQL. But the moment you get that, your application needs to be modified to be able to read from the master as well as the slave and how to load balance between them. If you start to do multi-zone stuff, like Amazon cannot do multiple masters across multiple zones. So you cannot actually build a truly high availability architecture on top of the existing RDS product.
So what you're doing is more distributed.
Precisely.
Than
So
what AWS
if you look at one of the examples of our customers, there was only one $1.5 billion game that launched in the last quarter of last year.
Right.
And we ran the entire social architecture database for that game. And Amazon had 3 outages during that time. And these guys survived 2 of them because of us.
And so what you're saying is this game, for example, that has a lot of money and marketing riding on it, can afford 0 outages.
Precisely.
Right.
Precisely. So the only time that they ever went down is when actually Amazon's multiple zones went down together.
Got it.
And other than that, they were perfectly fine. They were able to run across zones. If they would have done across regions, they would have even survived that outage.
So for what seems like this very niche model that you've found, right? How did you come to the insight that this would actually be foundation for, high growth company? And right now, I mean, we'll get into the story a little bit, and you guys raised funding in January. But how did you get that initial insight?
Sure. So I ran all of the technology for Network 18. It's a large company in India. They run CNN, CNBC, MTV, VH1, Nickelodeon, the Home Shopping Network, all of that stuff in India. And when we built all of those high-scale properties, what we realized is that of a team of like 150 developers, and we pretty much ran DevOps before it was cool to run DevOps. And we did NoSQL before it was cool to do NoSQL. We did Hadoop before Hadoop was hot. We did all of that stuff at that point in time.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we learned is that the hardest part is database scalability. And that's actually the bottleneck. So for a team of 150 developers, my top 10 devs were doing nothing but database scalability.
So it was obvious to you as you were operating a CTO that was like a key pain point.
Yep. And we went on to solve that pain point.
And so when did you decide to leave Net 18? And then you were in India at the time, right?
Yep.
In Bombay?
Yep.
Okay, and so you started, I think what's really important for the audience to know is you started the company in India.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But now you're headquartered
in Santa Clara.
In Santa Clara.
So we actually started the company as a US company. The one thing that we knew.
But walk us through the formation, because I think that's interesting, and it's also going to be something we're going to see over the next, let's say, 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, so we've pretty much set the template for that.
Okay.
One of the things that we realized pretty much very early on is that this is a global problem. It's not a local problem. It's not a problem that's regional to India. So it's a product that's going to be applicable the world over.
Okay.
So as a result of that, we made sure that we started the company in the US first.
Okay.
So it was a Delaware corporation founded always in the US because we knew it's a global problem. We got funding in the US. And the Indian company is actually the fully held entity of the US company. And the reason why we did that is because, one, it's easier to raise funding in the US.
Yes.
2, it's easier to file for IP in the US. So we filed 4 patents, and we did that in the US because it was much easier to do it here and then take it global. So that's what we did.
So just to make sure we've got it right, you came here, raised the funding, Delaware company, filed IP, and then you created an Indian entity which is owned by the parent, US parent, and then started building the company in India.
In India.
Okay, so walk us through how you did all that.
So we started essentially an engineering center in India because the talent availability is amazing and it's really economical. One of the problems that's there in Silicon Valley is that it's gotten so expensive to do a startup that you really cannot iterate a lot if you have a product that's really complicated and you're going to build something which is going to focus on multiple use cases, you don't have the resources that you need to be able to go down an approach, realize maybe that approach doesn't work, and then try again without raising funds again. We could do that for 2.5 years in $750,000. So that's the point. I mean, that's the benefit of being able to do that, that you can iterate and find the right model for what works for you much more effectively, much more efficiently in India. And you have talent availability from some of the best companies in India.
So you were able to have more iterative cycles in Bombay. And then when did you decide, okay, I need to move my family from Bombay to the Valley?
Sure. So we did that about a year and a half ago.
Okay.
And essentially, we did that sort of in stages. So I was here a lot in the US. I was spending sort of 6 months here, 6 months in India. And then once we'd established a beachhead, once we'd established sort of like a stable base to operate from in Santa Clara, hired a few people in the US, that's when I decided to move. I didn't move without.
So you were
setting up a
shuttling
team.
before, right?
Yeah.
And then you decided to move. So what's been, let's say from a more personal side, coming here and you're managing 2 offices, right? I mean, I'm sure you have people helping you and you're a single founder.
Yep.
What is it like to have a company where half the employees are in Santa Clara, half them in Bombay, so not that close by?
Well, the one thing is, yes, you're right. I mean, you've got to find the right people to be able to help you. So we have a lot of people in India, and we actually hired an engineering leader from the US who went to India.
Wow.
And he's the one who's running.
He's there full time.
He's there full time. So he runs our engineering center.
Okay.
And essentially, you've got to be able to find a way to sort of clone yourself to a certain extent. You've got to be able to find people who have the same kind of skill sets and can run the same kind of operation with the same kind of sort of thought process and mental map of how you operate things. And that's essentially what you've got to be able to do. Yeah. And you've got to be able to do 16, 20-hour days.
Yeah, of course, right? No sleep. So I think final part of this, which would be really interesting, and I think especially useful for, let's say, founders who are outside the U.S. who have startups, whether they're in India or in other places, and they want to start attacking U.S. markets, right? Let's say even on the technology side. Yeah. What kind of advice would you give to them about, okay, maybe they have designs to move here a year and a half. How do they learn from you?
So you don't actually decide to move first. The first thing that you've got to do is build the market. The first thing you've got to do is go out, get use cases, find the right kind of customers.
But the founders that I meet that are doing that right now, so I'm meeting with a few founders that are coming over from India, and they're coming here spending 6 weeks, and they're trying to learn the market themselves, right? But then the time that they're spending here, it's away from their companies in India, right? So how do you do that?
Well, so that's the thing. So you've got to find a point in time when you're ready for that. You can't go ahead and do that when you're sort of head down in product development mode. Okay. You've got to achieve a certain amount of stability. So what we did essentially is we ran beta cycles with customers in India. We did all of that stuff, got that out of the way, knew that the product works, knew that the product was stable, knew that the product could take the load that the market would see.
But then how did you get the US customers to say, okay, we're gonna have this company handle our load balances? That's not a US company.
Sure. I don't think that's much of a problem. And at the end of the day, what companies look at is what the solution does. And at the end of the day, you've got to be open to being tried out. You can't just go ahead and assume that you're going to sell stuff. You've got to be able to go to a customer, say, here's what I'm providing you. I'm going to work with you. I'm going to set it up. I'm going to make it work. And if it works, buy it.
So how much time did you spend coming here, right, while you were, let's say, living in India officially? How much time did you spend coming here, talking to customers, trying to get the tryouts?
Sure.
Because I think that's what people are struggling.
About 8 months.
Of going back and forth?
About 8 months. Well, not going back and forth that much, but yeah. Spent about 3 months the first time around, then 2 months back in India, then 3 months again. Okay. And then finally decided to move over full time because work here was more than work there. So you've sort of got to make that transition naturally. You can't set a hard date for it and decide, I am going to move by that date. You've just got to let the flow guide you.
Got it. Great. Well, congrats on moving the whole company here and your funding round, and you guys are taking off. So congratulations.
Thank you.